Ah! Oh, 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 thank God. Oh, 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 oh my God. I didn't, I didn't, I didn't sparkle.
Had some viewership, but not enough to make it last past the summer, so creator Dan Kurz decided to add something new. He introduced a vampire, and originally Barnabas' storyline was just going to last a few weeks. He was going to be there, and then he was just going to get killed off, but then popularity rose, he became a very popular character, and he stayed. And pretty soon he became the main character of the show, starting out as a villain first, and then becoming the hero. Much like the last video, I'm going to go through each individual storyline and talk about it. The first storyline is the resurrection of vampire Barnabas Collins. Here we are introduced to Barnabas. This is the best way they could introduce him, for here we are not entirely sure what he is. There are hints, but no full-blown answers yet. He is very mysterious, and his plans are not yet known until the next storyline. Right away, one is memorized by Barnabas, and Jonathan Frid gives an excellent portrayal. With little effort, Frid gives Barnabas a creepy vibe, old-fashioned charm and manners, almost Dracula-like, one could say. This storyline is just an introduction. He rises and comes to Collinwood posing as a cousin from England, albeit without the English accent, and eventually sets up residence in the old house on the estate, and has his servant Willie Loomis start restoring it. The second storyline, the kidnapping of Maggie Evans. Now here's where we finally realize, if we didn't before, that Barnabas is a vampire, for we see his fangs just before he bites Maggie Evans in her sleep. We also see how villainous he is, and his evil plan. Seeing how Maggie looks so much like his lost love, Josette Ducre, Barnabas kidnaps Maggie, brainwashes her to make her believe she is Josette. Then he wants to run away with her after he makes her a vampire. But things prove a bit difficult as the days and nights go by in this suspenseful edge-of-your-seat thriller that will keep you guessing as to what will happen next. My mom has always told me that back in the day she and other teens would run home or jump off the buses to get home to watch Dark Shadows. By this storyline, I was actually running home from work to try and catch the next episode to see what would happen next, because I just had to find out. And this storyline was like real edge of your seat. I mean, there were just sort of many twists and turns and close calls. I mean, it was just mind-numbing. It was just like, very scary. I really enjoyed it. Really, this is where it started kicking to me, this show. The third story is Julie Hoffman's attempt to cure Barnabas. Enter the psychiatrist and medical doctor, Dr. Julia Hoffman. Sent to help investigate who kidnapped Maggie, she discovers who and what Barnabas is and decides to help him. But soon, other people catch on that the kidnapper is still in town, and a manhunt ensues and begins to close in on Barnabas. And Dr. Hoffman's cure has drastic side effects that make Barnabas revert to a vampire again. But within this storyline of horror, and suspense, lies a tale of romance. A love triangle forms as Barnabas falls in love with Victoria Winters, whom is dating Burke Devlin, and Dr. Hoffman realizes she is falling in love with Barnabas and grows jealous of his affection for Victoria. This storyline was fun to watch, and it was great to see a kind of battle for love of Victoria between Burke and Barnabas, and to see that Barnabas can become vulnerable by either love or close calls by almost being found out. And Dr. Hoffman becomes an interesting character to see develop as well throughout the show. Barnabas terrorizing Julia Hoffman. By this point in the series, Barnabas is starting to slowly shift from being a villain to kind of an anti-hero in a way. And he's just he's not becoming, like I said, not really much villainous, just becoming anti-hero. He's just slowly going to be a hero. To cover his ass, Barnabas kills someone. Dr. Hoffman is guilt-ridden and threatens to reveal everything. Barnabas takes advantage of her guilt and makes her see the ghost of the one killed or see random objects pertaining to the murder to drive her mad. This was an interesting storyline for the two characters to go at each other and see more development since Barnabas' rival. We have seen that he really doesn't like what he does. He only does it because he has to. This character is the first reluctant or sympathetic vampire in film. And because of this, we see him develop from a villain to a good guy or anti-hero. And by the end of the storyline, we see him change even more. But his secret is threatened to be revealed when a seance sends Victoria Winters back in time to the year 1795 when Barnabas originally lived. And this is one of my favorite storylines coming up. These following storylines can be put together into what can be called the 1795 storyline, but they are broken down into these individual storylines as follows. Angelique Bouchard's Vampire Curse on Barnabas Collins. Here, as the title implies, we learn how Barnabas became a vampire. And as said in I believe Shakespeare, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. As we learn that after a small love affair with Angelique, he falls in love and is so to wed Josette, but Angelique will not have it and causes tragedy upon tragedy at Collinwood, from family deaths to forcing Barnabas to marry her to save his own sister. But once he finds out that she is a witch, kills her to end it, only to be cursed to become a vampire. This was very entertaining, full of twists and turns, creeps and horrors. One of the scariest things I saw was a hand just rising from a grave. It was just, how he did it was just so eerily creepy. It gave me chills. At one point, Barnabas walks out on Angelique. When she goes after her, and she opens the door only to find the bloody, mutilated ghost of one she has caused the death of. I did not actually expect this and quite literally jumped from one edge of my bed to the other. I was almost crawling up the walls. This show does have its scary moments and creepy moments. Also, we see the reverse transition in Barnabas. He starts out as a gentleman and eventually becomes a villain, and we see as an audience begin to pity, sympathize, and understand him more and understand his pain. And we also get to see a villainess who will become a constant pain to Barnabas, Angelique. A very dynamic character who always has something under her sleeve and is one that can always get to Barnabas. And to me, she has these hypnotic, piercing eyes that capture you and force you to stare at her as if she has put a spell on you. She's kind of like a siren in a way. The next one, Victoria Winters' witchcraft trial. Because she is from the future and Angelique is using her to divert attention from herself, Victoria Winters is accused, tried, and sentenced for witchcraft. Her prosecutor is the fanatic Reverend Trask, who is a character one has to love to hate. The story was also a love story between Victoria Winters and her lawyer, Peter Bradford. This storyline was tense to watch, for it was filled with plenty of twists and turns, almost like a John Grisham story. Some trivia: the witchcraft trial is inspired by Arthur Miller's The Crucible, and Trask's fate is inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's short story The Cask of Amontillado. I hope I pronounced that right. The next storyline, Nathan Forbes' manipulation of Millicent Collins. A story of a man marrying for money and doing anything to get more, from driving his wife Millicent insane to having a friend kidnap and almost kill his stepson. This storyline was a simple story of greed and blackmail that led to a satisfying end. This and the witch trial storylines ended what the last three storylines have come to be known together as the 1975 storyline. These 1795 storylines is one of my favorite storylines in the entire series for the reasons I described above, and also because the crew started playing with lighting. to add a horror mood and look to the sets, and started to make the show look a little creepier and scarier than before, and became helpful in later episodes because it kind of set the tone, the mood, and it's just that color, particularly when they shine it right in their face. It just gave this cool vibe. It was just like just their presence in that light just lent something to the scene. The next storyline is The Mystery of Jeff Clark. Now we are back in the present of 1960, I think it was 67, I think. Maybe it's 68. The Mystery of Jeff Clark. While driving Barnabas out of town, Victoria, returned from the past, almost hits a man who looks like Peter Bradford named Jeff Clark. Since he has no memory of his past, she helps him, and a new love relationship is formed that soon leads to a lifetime of happiness for Victoria Winters. I'm not a big critic of love stories, but I've seen enough chick flicks to get by. This storyline was cute and a nice change from all other storylines of horror and monsters. I found myself caring a great deal for these two characters and hoped all would turn out well for them, even in times of trouble, for there were plenty, and ended on a big shocker that leaves you worried that something bad might happen, yet hopeful that things will go well. The next storyline, The Creation of Adam. Based on the classic novel Frankenstein, a doctor treating Barnabas after the car crash cures him of his vampirism temporarily and says he can fully cure him by infusing his life force into a man-made creature stitched together from dead body parts. But the doctor dies before the creature comes to life, leaving Barnabas and Julia Hoffman alone to deal with a creature they named Adam to raise, and it becomes more than they bargained for. This is actually one of my favorite storylines since I am a fan of the Frankenstein novel, and I enjoyed how they adapted it for the show. The creature was sympathetic and very well played by Robert Rodan, who played the creature from a childlike state to an adult and made it believable. It's just unfortunate that the show was canceled before you got to see what Adam became after he left town, because eventually, after they finish the story with Adam, he gets to leave the town, and we never get to see what happens to him again. The story was full of twists, turns, betrayals, love, jealousy, and revenge. Granted, the storyline was a long one and started to drag, but still kept one interested. The next storyline is The Dream Curse. Upon discovering Barnabas is cured, Angelique disguises herself as Cassandra and marries Roger Collins and sets a dream curse sets a dream curse that goes from one person to the next and gets worse and more horrifying until it reaches Barnabas. For when it reaches him, he will die and become a vampire again. Probably, this storyline is probably one of the least popular storylines in the series, but I found it to be interesting. It wasn't full of excitement, but it was fun to watch and is a good example of how much the show can do effect-wise with very little money. And we also get a new ally named Professor Stokes, who becomes helpful to our heroes and is an interesting character in his own right. And this character is actually one you actually kind of like. He's kind of like becomes one of the three amigos with. He becomes part of like Barnabas's main circle of friends, and he becomes a very interesting character and one you kind of like. The next storyline, Elizabeth's fear of being buried alive. Based on Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Premature Burial, Elizabeth, due to a curse by Angelique, fears she will be buried alive, as the title is already explained. An interesting storyline that started to get a little annoying and dragged on too long, but I do have to admit I was worried for Elizabeth until the end. And now this is where it gets interesting. Nicholas Blair's scheme to create a master race. Warlock Nicholas Blair discovers Adam and wants a bride made for Adam, so a master race can be made for his master Diabolos, aka Satan. The bride named Eve was good, the vampire Tom Jennings, and the storyline was fun, exciting, and a lot of good cliffhangers and shocking moments and thrills. But what I really liked in this storyline was the character of Nicholas Blair. He is a joy to watch, and the character is very manipulative, and seems to enjoy spreading misery to get his ends met. And it seemed that the actor, Humbert Allen Estrado, just really enjoyed his role. I mean, when he smiled, it just seemed so genuine. He just seemed like he really loved it. The next storyline, Chris Jennings' werewolf curse. Tom Jennings Jennings' twin brother arrives to find out his brother died, but he himself has a terrible secret that is more uncontrollable and terrifying than Barnabas's vampirism. Well, he's a werewolf, as it kind of implies from the title. An interesting and suspenseful storyline that keeps you wondering who will get killed next. Will Chris find a cure? Will someone find out? And is this curse connected to the ghost haunting at Collinwood by the ghost Quentin Collins? But that is for another video. Ever since Barnabas first appeared, the ratings skyrocketed and the show became popular. As I said earlier, teens were jumping off the buses and running home to catch the next episode. This show's popularity was just growing and growing. It did not get to the highest of popularity until the 1897 storyline. But girls were going crazy for Barnabas. So crazy that it soon became all about Barnabas, and he became the star of the show. To me, once Barnabas came to the show, it just clicked. A vampire, gothic soap, and other supernatural elements. Everything just fit perfectly. And seeing Barnabas' transition from good to bad and go from the 1795 storyline, bad to good, good to bad, and bad to good, was great. It was a great character development, and the unrequited love story and friendship of Barnabas and Julie Hoffman is an interesting relationship, and sometimes you don't see often. But more interesting characters, storylines, and moments of terror are ahead in the next video, where one of the most popular characters is more than meets the eye.